Today we're going to try something new and something I have never tried. And yes, the fun part is to showcase this when I have never done it before. It's not that I want to learn something and then go talk about it after. I want to talk about things as I'm learning them and maybe as I'm failing. And the big goal with the Parawing is always to do the same thing like I do with the wing. I want to be on a small size board, 55 to 58 liters, and be on the Parawing. Downwinding on a small board is so much fun, but the wing in my hand is bothering me. So the big goal is to Parawing on a small board. But can I get the board started on a negative 20 liter buoyancy board? Test setup is a 58 liter Armstrong FG board. I'm using a 1225 MA front wing, really big. Haven't ridden a big wing like this in a long time. Well, we're going to see whether I'm going to be riding it or not. And we have a 3 meter Ensis Roger, and it's about 20 knots out there. And that's what we're going to find out today. I think, I'm scared, I'm nervous. This is not going to be easy. But we're going to experiment this and we're going to talk about it after, whether we learned it or not. Well, first impression, actually frustrating the first few times, particularly trying to get on your knees on a board this small. But if you train this and you learn it doing it with a wing, it really helps to find that one balance point. And then after that, it's just trying to find a balance between the board, yourself, and the wing that now is pulling on your arm. And that is a little tricky, but hey, it is learnable. I am actually surprised. It took me 3 tries and 500 yards down the beach, and I managed to get up on my feet. So that was actually really cool. I was really surprised I was able to do that this quick. So this is learnable, guys. This is learnable. The one thing that I couldn't really figure out is how did I get this thing out of the water now? I could just not like sheet it in and get that power and get going. So that's something, that's technique, you guys. So that's something I'm gonna need to learn. And my daughter was kind of laughing at me when I got out of the water. I'm like, well, you know what, you Sigma, why don't you try and I'll film you. So she never Parawinged. She's usually just a winger and a surfer. So now my daughter's gonna try it and we're gonna see how she's doing. See how Sigma she is. At least 3 walk of shames later and about 9 tries, I'm sorry to say, but I'm a little frustrated. And I learned also something, because I really was under the impression that getting on my knees is going to be the hard part. And to my surprise, it actually wasn't all that hard. Getting on the knees was not that hard, and getting up on the feet was actually not that hard either. And that really surprised me. But what was hard, that also surprised me, was getting this freaking thing started. And you can see this over and over. I'm trying to pump the Parawing. I'm trying to find a pressure point and pump this thing out of the water. And with an MA 1225, I'm thinking like, well, this should be really not that much of a problem, but it actually was. And I'm trying to think, and I'm starting to think if there is some equipment to blame, just because that soap bar FG board is hard to find the glide with, hard to slog it, and the shorter board, whenever I pump my front foot, I kind of push it underwater rather than pushing it out. So for now, we're actually trying a new board. I actually got the 55 ml out of the car, thinking, I have foot straps on this, and if I can get into foot straps, that is really helpful with shorter boards, and I can get the glide. However, this board is only 18 inches wide, and now I'm really concerned about getting up on my knees. So I'm gonna let my daughter do the honors first and see how that goes. And I got about 1 more walk of shame in me, and then we're definitely gonna conclude and maybe have to continue this. So we could see with my daughter, she just skips the knee part, puts her front foot into the foot strap and pushes herself up like this. How cool is that? If you were young and capable of doing such a thing, that is absolutely unthinkable for me. And she also ended up getting on foil, and then for her, since this is really her first time actually being on a Parawing, she's never done it before, then it's just the lack of knowledge and the lack of practice on knowing what to do once you're actually on foil, and then kind of sheet this thing out or whatever you want to call it, and then dig your heels in and then sail into the wind. So she hasn't really learned and practiced that. As far as I concern, I really feel I learned a lot today, you guys. The number one takeaway is that actually getting on your knees on a sinker board like that is actually not as hard as I expected. And when you have the Parawing in your hand, tucking on one end, it gives you enough stability to actually find your balance, get into the drop knee stance and get up. The comparison between the two boards really taught me a lot. And one thing is that the other board that I used secondly, the second board, the ML55, it's a 5.5 by 18 inches wide. And I feel like the FG board was 58 liters, and I really felt the 3 liters in difference. I never would have thought that would make such a difference. And I felt like I was almost there. I was almost there, ready to go, but I lacked just the necessary oomph to get going. And I don't know if exactly this is a lack of skill, getting enough pressure on the Parawing and get going, or if I just am too old and too heavy and just not skilled enough to get a small board started like this. So I feel if I had a little bit a bigger board, so just maybe instead of a 5 by 18 inches and 55 liters, if I had the whole thing maybe 6.0 and maybe 19.5 inches, I think I would be actually doing pretty okay. I think that would be good. Then I could knee start, and I think I would be right there. So that is really the takeaway. Is this thing is actually not that hard. It is learnable. I am not done with this mission. Another main takeaway for all you guys who've been following me on this Parawing saga is that I barely deal with entanglements anymore. It's like magically somehow the Parawing doesn't entangle anymore, and also if I have an entanglement, it is super easy to fix. So just like my kite buddy said a few months ago, it will just go away, and just so it did. We continue this is going to be a continued kind of situation, and we'll see you guys in the next one.